Good morning, class. We're going to pick up with Naaman. Remember, he had leprosy, and the servant girl told him that there was a man named Elisha, a prophet in Israel, who by the power of God could heal Naaman of his leprosy. And so Naaman went to visit Elisha. He took many, many gifts. And who came to the door? Not Elisha. Elisha didn't come to talk to Naaman. He sent his servant to go tell Naaman to wash in the Jordan River 7 times. Naaman didn't like that idea. The Jordan River was a muddy river. He felt humiliated. He was very angry that Elisha wouldn't even come out to talk to him. So we are at Naaman washes in the Jordan. Arriving at the river, Naaman humbled himself, took off his outer garments, and waded out into the muddy Jordan River. On the bank of the river, his servants watched to see what would happen. Naaman dipped himself down into the water and then came up. He looked at his arms. The leprosy was still there. His skin was still covered with leprosy. "I told you it wouldn't work," he may have shouted to his servants. But then he remembered the prophet Elisha had told his servant, who told Naaman, 7 times you must dip yourself in the river. So Naaman went under the water again and again, each time, and his servants probably counting as he went under. They anxiously waited as Naaman came up out of the water the 7th time. Naaman is clean. "Look, look," Naaman called to them. "The leprosy is gone. I'm healed. My skin looks as new as a baby's skin." Everyone could hardly believe their eyes. It was true. Naaman had been completely cleansed of the terrible disease of leprosy. Naaman had simply dipped 7 times in the Jordan River and his leprosy was gone. It was unbelievable. Elisha certainly had the power of God. Never in Syria had they seen or heard of anything like this. Throwing on his clothes, Naaman leaped into his chariot, and with his servants following him, he drove his chariot back up to Elisha's house. Elisha refuses a gift for what God has done. This time the prophet Elisha was there in person to greet Captain Naaman. Elisha knew that God would heal Naaman if Naaman would be willing to humble himself and obey the word of the Lord. Sometimes pride and unbelief keep us from receiving great blessings from God. Captain Naaman stood humbly and gratefully before God's prophet Elisha and exclaimed, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except the God of Israel." Through this wonderful experience of being healed of the incurable disease of leprosy, Naaman was convinced that there was only one true God, the God of Israel. Captain Naaman, wanting to show Elisha how very thankful he was, offered to give Elisha the wonderful gifts and presents he had brought with him from the king of Syria. But the prophet Elisha refused to take them, saying, "No, the true and living God worked the miracle of healing for you, and I will accept no payment for something that God alone has done." God does not need or accept payment for his blessings on people. You just go back to Syria and tell the king of Syria and everywhere there about the true and living God who can do the impossible. From this we can learn that we cannot pay God for working on our behalf. We cannot pay for his salvation, for his grace, or for his help. They are all free gifts. God's gifts can never be bought with money. He gives all for nothing, if we will just trust him. There are some false prophets today who say that if you give money, they will pray for your healing. But we need to remember that God never works like that. God doesn't charge for his services. And Elisha made that very clear to Naaman and to all who read the Bible. Naaman then made a wonderful promise. "From this day forward," he said, "I will offer neither burnt offerings nor sacrifice to the false gods of wood and stone, but only to the true and living God of the whole world." Naaman determined to serve this true God and to be a testimony for him back in his heathen country of Syria. When Naaman returned home completely healed of his leprosy, what joy must have filled his house, and one of the happiest ones there probably was the little maid. Do you think she was glad she told him about God's prophet Elisha? The little maid was a missionary, and as a result of what she told Naaman, he came to know the true God. God can use us, too, to tell others about Jesus. He can cleanse them of something much worse than leprosy. He can cleanse people of their sin and give them the gift of eternal life. Do you know someone whom you can tell about our great God and his gift of salvation?